Hi guys, welcome. Today we're going to build our own custom dashboard in Python using a library called Dash. We are going to style it using CSS, connect to Yahoo Finance API, and do some calculations on the simple moving average for 10 days and 30 days, and have a nice way to display it and interact with the data. Okay, so let's open VS Code or whatever ID you'd like to follow with, and let's open a new terminal. So let's go to terminal, new terminal, and let's install our dependencies, the necessary libraries that we are going to use in this project. So let's say pip install dash, this is our main library. Let's install dash core components dash HTML components and yfinance for the Yahoo API. So let's give it a minute, and when it's finished we can start by creating our file, and this will be our dashboard. So I'm calling it dashboard.py, and inside we can start by importing the necessary libraries that we installed. So let's import dash core components as DCC to make it shorter, just 1C. Let's import dash HTML components as HTML, going to use it often, and from dash dependencies let's import inputs and outputs. Okay, we also need to import our yfinance to get our stock price from the Yahoo Finance, and here we go. Now we can just initialize our app. To do so, let's write app equals to dash, and let's also run our server. So app.run server, and inside let's write debug equals to true to have these nice warnings when you made any mistake, and that's it. We can even test it. So if we write python dashboard.py or just click the go button, this will run like a live server in our localhost, and by default is on port 8050, but we are going to see how to change the ports. But we have like an error, right? So it's telling us that the layout is not available. And this is a necessary element to any Dash application. So we always have to have like a layout, no matter what, right? So let's actually starting by writing one. So let's say app.layout, and our layout will have an HTML div. So this will be our main element. And inside, let's write hello from the other side. And if our server is still running, and make sure it is, and if you save the file, now we can just go again to the same localhost, and we can see that our message is here, hello from the other side. Okay, cool. So now we have our app running. So let's give it some content. Inside our HTML div, let's write html.h2. So we want to have a header, and inside the header we're going to have our title. And let's write in our title, so welcome to our dynamic dashboard. So let's do it. Okay, and if you want to see, you can go again to the same address and see it's here. Welcome to our dynamic dashboard. Cool. So now that we have our title, we want to give it a class, and we can do it by class name equals to title. This will not change anything on the design, but it's important to style the elements. We're going to use a CSS file to style the dashboard, and we can start to do it right now. So let's go to our project folder and create a new folder called assets. Inside the assets folder, you're going to add a new file, and this file is going to call it styles.css. And here we are going to style our elements. So let's actually make it bigger, and let's go again to our localhost to have it here. Okay, separate it bits. Yeah. Let's run the dashboard, and let's grab our element called title. So as we call it title to our header, and we want to style it. So if we refresh the page, we have welcome to our dynamic dashboard, but let's give it some style. So the first style is like just align the text because we want it in the middle. So text aligned, and it's going to be center. Okay, so now we can see that our styles are working. Nice. So welcome to our dynamic dashboard. Next thing is give it a color. So we want something like gray. Now we have it. Welcome to our dynamic dashboard again. Cool thing about VS Code is that you can change the color to an RGB color, like inside the text editor. So you can choose like whatever color you want, like around the color palette, and it will automatically change in your code. So you can see now we have something like red. Okay, so it's very useful, but let's just keep it like as gray for now. Something like this, yeah. Maybe we're going to change it later, but for now let's keep it. Let's give it some margin, and here we want 70px, 70px. Whoops, without spaces here. Now we have it like not in the top, and we want to give it like a font, a different font, right? This is boring, and I want to show you how to get like external fonts here. So something very commonly used in web development is Google Fonts. And if we Google it, we can see that we have a lot of fonts available for our entertainment. Okay, so let's take one that is very cheesy, but it will show you that it's actually working. So it's notable, and we can grab it. We can just go by select this style, and you have embed, and here let's take first the CSS, and let's add it to our CSS, and then we need to connect to the Google Fonts link. So how to do it in our Dash application? Since we don't have any HTML file, we have to do it directly in our dash.dash. So when we initialize the app, we have to tell Dash that we are using something external. So let's say external stylesheets, open like list, and let's add our URL that we grabbed from Google. This should be enough for us to have the changes reflected. So let's again open our dashboard, and here we go. We have this cheesy font. But the point is that you can take whatever font you want and just apply it to your dashboard and style it with external fonts. So cool. Now we have our title mostly styled. I guess it's not that bad. And let's also give like actually background to the entire page. So let's go by body, and it will select the entire body, and let's write background. And let's give it something that is white but not white. Okay, so let's use the same approach as before. Let's write white, and then let's go to the color palette, and let's choose something very close to white but not white. Okay, so maybe here 247, better, 44, 44 as well. And it will give us like a nice contrast between our elements and the page itself. So let's go again and see how the does it look? Okay, it looks good, but was not updated. And this will be our background color for this example. So now that we have some styles, let's add more elements. So the next element, it's going to be a div, and if we want to add like another element inside our div, so you can see that we have our div here, we already have like one HTML element. So this is still a list, so we have to separate it by a comma. Okay, so let's add a comma here and let's create an HTML div. And inside this div, we're going to have two elements. We're going to have our graph, and we are going to have some radio items. So like some buttons that we can click and toggle between each other to select a moving average for 10 days and a moving average for 30 days. So let's start by creating our graph. And again, we want it as a list because it's more than one element. And let's add like tcc.graph. Okay. And for now, we can leave it like empty. We don't need anything. We can just give it actually a class name. And let's call it graph1, very original, I know. And let's give it one ID of graph. Okay. Now that we have that, let's go for the next element. And this will be a DCC again, and then radio items. And inside the radio items, as we spoke before, we want to have two options. So let's actually tell them, okay, we want two options, and this will be a list. And inside this list, we are going to have several dictionaries with our options. So our first option is, we have to give it a name, so label. And the label of our option will be moving average 10. And we want to set a value of moving average 10. So we're going to use this value to know which button is currently selected, and this will make the changes in our graph, but we're going there. The next label will be exactly the same, but for 30 and 30 days here. Okay, so we have our options. We can even take a look in our dashboard. So let's go there, and here we go. It's a beautiful dashboard. So you can see that we have a graph empty for now, and we have like two radio items. So moving average 10, moving average 30, nothing is happening, but it's going to happen soon. So now that we have our options, we want to give it a class name. So let's call it radio, and let's give it an ID of radio item. Yeah, radio items, because we are taking more than one item. Okay, now that we have that, we also want to give like one class name to this div. This is a container, right? So let's call it container. So class name equals to container. And we are all set. These are all the elements that we are going to use in our dashboard. We're going to style it. We are going to add some data in our graph, but this is basically it. Okay, so let's go back to our styles, our folder assets with file name styles.css, and let's start by actually positioning the items in the right order. So let's select our container. That's let me show you the dashboard. Okay, so as you remember, we added our graph and these radio items inside a container, right? And if we go here to somewhere, yeah, container, you can see that this div container contains the buttons, our items, and our graph. So the next step is actually to position them like in a way that you can have the graph in the left, and in the right you'll have the items. So we're going to use flexbox for that, and let's actually grab our container and let's write display equals to flex to action our flexbox. We don't need to semicolons, and let's give it an height of 600 pixels for the entire container, and let's justify contents as space evenly. Okay, and now if we look to our dashboard, we can see it as like they are already positioned. They are not in the right proportions yet, because we are going to make our graph take 0.9 of the entire thing. So we can actually do that now. So we can grab our graph here. So let's just type the class name graph. And here, let's give it as flex 0.9. Okay. So if we go again there, now things are better, right? We can also give our radio, and this is the radio items. Let's give it a margin from the top of 10 px, just to have it not so, in the top. Here we have it more like, it looks better. So cool. So now we have our basic designs. So I think for CSS, that's actually it. We're not going to touch it anymore. You can play around with it. You can position whatever you want. You can add different colors, but this is not like a design tutorial. It's more about building the dashboard itself. So next thing that we actually would like to have is the data, because right now we don't have any data in our graph, and we cannot add anything because there's no data. So let's go back to our dashboard, okay? And let's take the data from the Yahoo API. So to do so, we can start by creating a data frame, and by default, this library is going to return pandas data frame. So let's say that df equals to yfinance.download, and we are going to take Microsoft. So MSFT, this is the ticker for Microsoft, and we want to take it between a data range. So the first argument is the ticker. The second argument is the date. So the starting dates that we would like to take the data from. So we want to take it from 2020, January 1st, and let's say till 2020, 26th of June, sorry. And here we go, like this line is enough to take the stock price from the Yahoo Finance and actually add it to a data frame. So let's print our data frame and let's start our codes. And as you can see, the first thing it does before even think about the Dash app is actually to take our stock price and print it here, okay? So we have our data frame with our stock price. Now it would be useful to have a graph as well, right? So the next step is actually to create a function outside our Dash application. Well, this is not necessary. I don't know what is this. Okay, and let's call it get graph. Okay, and the idea is simple. Here in our graph we have an empty graph, and to add data to the graph we have to fill the argument figure. Okay, and basically we can add the data inside these arguments. The thing is, we don't have a graph yet, right? We have the data, but we don't have the graph. And the figure argument is waiting for the actual graph. So let's actually start to building our graph on, let's say, pig equals to, and we have to import our plotty library, because we're going to build a graph with plotting. And let's import plotly.graph objects as go. Okay, and let's start by go.figure. And we are using the old way of getting like a graph in Plotly, but in my experience it also gives you more flexibility in case that you'd like to add some additional annotations or vertical lines for entry and exit points in a given strategy. So we are going to stick with the old graph objects, and we are going to build our figure as that. So the first thing that we would like to do is to add a trace to our figure, and this trace will be go scatter. And inside our go scatter, first we would like to say that our mode, it will be lines. Okay. Second, we would like to give it an x of df dot. And here there's an important step that we miss, that by default, if you look below, we have date as index. We don't want it to be as index because it will mess a bit the way that the display on the x-axis will look like. So let's reset it. So let's say the x.reset index, and let's just say in place equals true. And just with that, if we restart our, okay, we cannot, let's just comment for a while just to show you. You don't have to comment, it's just for me to show you. Okay, so I have to take this figure here, apologies. Okay, let's try now. And if you see now, we are not printing the F, but now we are. Okay, so as you can see now, our date is now a column. It's no longer index. We have a numeric index now, and the date type is date. So it will be easier for us to build our graph without concerning about the data types and other things. So let's start by adding here the x.date. I mean, like not date. Not dot, just date, and our y will be df, and here we want a close price. So we have several columns, we don't want a low, high, we just want a close price. We are making it simple, and let's give it a name of it's not necessary, but yeah, let's give it a name of price. Okay, and this is basically enough. We can just return fig, and we'll have our graph returned. And here in our DCC graph, we can say figure equals to get graph. Okay, so we can call the function, and the function will generate this graph from our df, and it will return a graph, a figure. Okay, and then our dashboard will take it and it will update and rendering it. So let's look at it. Let's open again. And here we go. We have our close price and it's already nicely plotted. So we would like to have a title. Okay, so let's start by that. And here, any changes that we would like to do in our graph, they will be made in the function. And you'll see why we're using the function when we actually plug it to the radio items. But let's just stick with the function for now, and let's give it a title. So we can do fig.update layout. Whoops, and here I have to write it properly. And let's give it a title, and our title will be in dictionary, because we don't want only set the title, but we would like to style it as well. So add it in the middle. So let's say text equals to Microsoft's price, close price. Okay, and this is enough to have the text, but we want to give it like a nice position. So let's say that our y will be 0.9 and our x will be 0.5. You can play with the values, of course, but let's skip it as it is. So let's run it again and yeah, see it. So now we have a nice title saying Microsoft close price, and that's it for the figure. So now we have another challenge. So we want to plug, like we want to make it dynamic. Right now when we click our moving averages, nothing happens, but we would like to have like different lines appearing when we click the moving average 10, so the moving average for 10 days, and the moving average for 30 days when we click the second button. So let's tackle that. Let's go back to our code. Okay, so now we have to use something called a callback. And a callback allows us to take an input and output something in our dashboard. That's the basic concept. Let's write app. So still from our app, we have to add a decorator, and we can say app.callback. And in our callback, we have two arguments. So it's output and input, and they are both mandatory. If you're using callbacks, you always have to add like an output and an input. So let's start by the first argument, the output, and let's take output that, if you remember, we imported from dependencies. And our output will be, and here it should be a list, like the input and the output. Not mandatory for the output, but in the inputs we always have to add a list. So to make it always consistent, let's always add lists. So let's select our graph as an output because we want to output something to the graph. So graph, this is the ID. And we want to output to the figure, okay? So the first thing is what identifies the element that you want to output something to. And the second thing is what in the element would you like to change. So in our case, we want to change the figure because every time you click in the button, you'd like to have it changed, or in our case, add a line. So cool, so now we have our output. Let's also define our input. So here we have to add a comma, and let's write input. Also a list, don't forget that, it's important, otherwise you'll run into errors. And let's select our radio items. So this ID here, so you can just copy paste it or write it up to you. Just copy pasting because I'm lazy. So radio items, and we want to take the value from it, okay? So remember, we gave these values for a reason, so we want to know which radio item is currently selected. So from radio items, let's take the value as an input, okay? So this is very intuitive. You can follow, like, your intuition is telling you, okay, I have an input and an output. And this is good because every callback is followed by a function. So here you're just stating what is the input and the output, and after that you have to tell what to do with it, right? So let's create a function after the callback, and let's say on radio click or something, and let's take a value here. Let's call it v, and this v is going to come from here, this input value, okay? So if we print v, okay, it is, and we have to return always something, so let's return an empty list for now, and let's run this. Okay, you can see that we have none. We are going to delete that, but it can be a bit annoying because when the dashboard initializes, the default is that you're getting an input for our radio items as none, even if you don't click it, okay? That's why we have the error, but we are going to handle it. But if you actually click something, you should have like the value here outputted in your terminal. So now we know that we clicked on the moving average for 10 days, right? So we have to do something with it. But first, let's fix this problem with the none. Because again, when the dashboard initializes, it initializes with a none value, and this will be given to our function, and we don't want to do anything with that. So to fix this problem, so the Dash team actually gave us a cool stuff on the Dash exceptions, that is prevent update. So let's go from Dash and then dot exceptions. Let's import prevent update. And simple as that, like if our value, our v, is none, as we had here, so equals to none. So we would like to raise prevent update. So raise prevent update. This will actually just prevent this function to execute any longer. So it's very cool because this will like get rid of all the errors. So as you can see, the dashboard initialized and no error, no none, nothing. If we go to our dashboard, we can see that, yeah, cool, no error, nothing. If we click it, we have it somewhere. No, okay, this is not inside the if statement. So this is outside, guys. So yeah, be careful with that. So if we try it again, and if we click it, here we go, moving average 10, okay? It's just complaining that, you know, like, is expecting something for the graph figure. We're going to handle that, don't worry about the error. But the main point is, yeah, we can get our value, we don't have any nonce, so this function will not execute it without being needed. So let's move on. So let's give something to this function to return to the figure. Okay, so let's call our function here, so get graph, and let's pass it our value v. Okay, so let's tell him like it's moving average 10 or 30. And we have to do some small modifications in our function. The first modification is actually to allow us to get an argument here. Let's give it a default value of empty. And let's actually just write an if statement. So between this fig at trace and the figure update layout, we can just say if v equals, here forget to equals, moving average 10. So we are going to add a different trace. So we can take, first we have to calculate it, right? So we have to calculate the moving average. Let's create simple moving average 10, and pandas is awesome for this because it calculates it for us. Basically, we just have to take the close price. We have to roll it for a window, and in this case is just 10. And we take the mean, and here we go. We have the simple moving average. Awesome, right? There's just one small thing that I would like to add, because without it, the moving average will start on the 10th day. So let's add min periods equal to 1 to just like fill the entire line from the beginning. Okay, so now that we have our simple moving average for 10, let's add it to the graph. So fig dot add trace, and again like go dot scatter. So you can even copy this line, but I'm going to write it again because it's a good exercise. So let's go. So the mode is also lines, and I want to have like the same x, so df.date, and the y will now be our simple moving average that we just created, so simple moving average 10. Okay, and let's give it a name. Now the name is important because it's simple moving average 10, and this will appear in our label legend after this. So let's see how it looks, see if our moving average 10 is working. So let's again initialize our server. Probably don't have to do it, I just have the autosave on, so this is shutting down the server. So if we click it, voila, now we have like a nice line and dynamic crossover between them. You can see when the points are actually crossing. You can like elaborate your strategy upon that, but this is the basic functionality. So let's just add the moving average for 30 days as well. So let's create an elif, and let's say if the value equals to moving average 30, I think that, yeah. Let's do exactly the same thing. So copy paste, and let's do some separation here, but let's call it moving average 30. The periods will be 30, and here will be 30, and here will be 30. So I guess that's basically it. Let's run it again. Okay, here we go. So moving average 10, cool. Moving average 30, cool as well, right? So now we have a nice way to display both averages, and this is it for our dashboard. You can go one step further and actually add like potential entry and exit points when these two averages crosses, or you can apply any strategy that you would like to do. But the purpose of this tutorial is just to show you how to build like a nice and quick tutorial in Dash. So hope you like, and stay tuned for more videos. Thank you.